Hey guys, Connor here from Kamerastore.com. Today we're going to be covering the Nikon FE2, just going over some basic features and functions. This is a 35mm SLR released in 1983. It's electronically controlled, meaning that you need a battery in order for it to function. It does have a few shutter speeds that you can use when there's no battery, but the vast majority of the camera's features require batteries to be installed. It uses the Nikon F mount, so all lenses with Nikon F mount will fit. There are some compatibility issues, but most of them will work. The FE2 is part of a larger family of cameras with the FM, FM2, FE, and FE2. They're all sort of built on the same platform, but they have different specifications. The FM and FM2 are mechanical cameras that don't require batteries, and the FE and FE2 both require batteries, but because of that, they're able to have wider shutter speed ranges and also aperture priority auto exposure. So they have a couple extra features that maybe make them a bit more desirable or a bit less desirable depending on what you're looking for. So let's get started with putting the batteries inside this camera. So you're going to want to turn it on its back. Right here is the battery door. Take a coin, put that in and spin, and eventually the door will come out, and then we're ready to load our batteries. So there's that. The batteries will fit in here. This camera takes LR44 batteries, so they're these small sort of button looking batteries. And you're going to need two of them. They fit with the positive side up in here. And then that's ready to go. So we'll put that back in the camera, give it a little push, and then screw it in. Great. So now that we have the batteries installed, we have access to all of the shutter speeds and features that this camera has to offer. Okay, now we're ready to install the lens. So we're just going to remove the caps from here. Today we have the 45mm f2.8p lens, sort of a rare lens, but it's a great choice for the FE2 because it's so thin, so it pairs nicely with the small body of this camera. On Nikon lenses, there is a dot here on most lenses that will line up with this dot here on the body. So you just want to line those two up. And there you go. When you hear the click, the lens is locked and ready to use. But before we get into that, I'd like to just talk about the AI tab on these lenses, on these cameras. So right here, you can see this tab that's moving. This is the AI tab on the camera. And this is how the camera knows what aperture the lens has selected. You can see the lens has a bit of a ridge, and that ridge lines up with this tab. So with the FE2, you need lenses with this ridge. This is the AI ridge. It's fairly common. Older lenses won't have it, and then newer lenses won't have it. But there are many, many lenses that do. Otherwise, your camera won't be able to meter properly. So yeah, now that we've got the lens installed, we're ready to talk about this camera's features. So we'll start from the left and move to the right. So right here we have the ISO selector. So this will match whatever film you put into the camera. To change it, we lift this silver ring and just move until we reach the right one. So there's a little bit of a red indicator there. Now it's at 100, and if that's the speed film you're using, that's where it should be. So moving in, we have the rewind knob here for when the roll is complete, and then we have the exposure compensation here. So this silver button, you press that, and you're able to move this around, and then you can get exposure compensation to either overexpose or underexpose your shot, depending on the scene and what you want to do creatively. So moving past the prism here and for the hot shoe, we get to the shutter speed dial. So the FE2 has quite a wide range of shutter speeds from 8 seconds all the way to 1/4000th of a second, which is quite fast and allows you to handle pretty much any situation. It also has, if we go back here, this M250th. This is the mechanical shutter speed. So if there are no batteries installed, the camera can fire at 1/250th of a second, and it'll be able to do that, yeah, again, no matter if there are batteries or not. This is also the flash sync speed for this camera, so if you have a flash installed, that's the speed that you should use. You can see that 1/250th is also in red here on the normal shutter speed dial. Then we have the shutter button. Press that once the camera's been wound, the shutter fires. Moving on, we have the shutter advance lever. Once the shutter has been fired, pull that, ready to fire again. So and here we have a double exposure lever. So if you press that down and then wind, the camera will cock the shutter without moving the film, allowing you to do double exposures, put 2 frames on the same frame of film. So lots of creative potential there. Moving on to the front of the camera, we have a self-timer here. This is a depth of field preview, so you can see as I press that, the aperture in the lens stops down. This is the lens release button, so if you want to get the lens off, you need to press that, turn it, there you go. And then this is a PC sync port for flash. If the flash doesn't communicate with the hot shoe, this is probably the port that you're going to use. Moving on to the bottom of the camera, we have 2 connections for the motor drive here. This is for power and this is to move the film. We have the rewind button here that releases tension in the camera to allow you to rewind it when the roll is done. And then a tripod mount, and then there's the battery cover that we dealt with earlier. Okay, talking now about the lens. We have a focus ring on the front here, and it's quite a thin one because this is a thin lens, but this tells you how far away from the camera is in focus. It has distances marked in meters and feet, and you can see that the minimum focus here is 0.45 meters, even though it is quite small. That's how close this lens can focus, all the way out to infinity. Moving closer to the body, we have the aperture ring here, and this tells you how big the opening is inside the lens when you fire the shutter. So if I leave it at 2.8, which is wide open, you can see the lens doesn't stop down at all, but if I turn it all the way to 22 and fire the shutter, you should be able to see, yep, the aperture closes down almost all the way. So that controls how much light is let in when the shutter is fired. It also controls depth of field. So a wider aperture, a smaller number, gives you a shallower depth of field. As I mentioned before, the Nikon FE2 has aperture priority auto exposure. So to activate that, you're just going to pop the shutter speed dial into A mode there. When you do that, it'll lock. It won't let you access the normal speeds. To disengage that lock, there's a button here in the middle. Press that, and then the shutter speed dial will click back normally. But yeah, once you click it into A, the camera will pick a shutter speed based on the aperture that you have selected. So to activate the light meter in this camera, we actually have to take the advance lever and pull it out just slightly, and you'll see that it clicks in and out. When it's in this out position, the meter is active. To turn it off, you just press it right back in. So the view through the viewfinder of the Nikon FE2, you'll see what we call a Judas window on the top, which shows you what aperture you have selected. And then on the left side, there is a needle that moves up and down to pick a shutter speed. So because we have the camera in A mode, the shutter speed that it has selected with that needle that moves up and down will be the shutter speed that the camera picks. So when the camera is not in A mode and we click it into the regular shutter speed range, you'll see a green bar move down. That is what shutter speed is currently selected. So you have the black needle, which tells you what shutter speed the camera would select, and then you have the green bar, which is what is currently selected. So to get proper exposure, what you're going to want to do is get that green bar to match up. So the Nikon FE2 has a split prism in the center there, and you can see as we move it in and out, the top and bottom images move in and out of alignment with each other. For something to be in focus, these 2 images have to be perfectly aligned. So once you've finished a roll in your Nikon FE2, you're going to have to rewind it. So to do that, I'm going to take the camera upside down, press this button. This releases tension in the camera. And then we're going to take this knob here, unfold the lever, turn it along with this arrow this way. Spin, spin, spin. Eventually you'll feel the tension of the film release as it gets pulled back to this side. Once it's back in the canister, you're going to take this tab here, push that, and then pull this out, pull it out just a little bit more, then the film back opens. Oh. And there will be a canister of film here. And you grab that and bring it to your lab for processing. One thing about the back of the camera, aside from the viewfinder, you have a memo holder here, so you can put the side of a box for film in there, just to remind you what film you have. So this has been a brief overview of the Nikon FE2, just some basic functions and features. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below if you want us to do a specific camera, or if you want more information about this one, and we'll get back to you shortly.